guys, welcome again to Joe Knows, and we are in our series about talking about marriage and relationships, and we're in our part three of resolving conflict, how to resolve conflict. So, 2 sessions ago, we talked about the importance of in a conflict when we approach each other, that we don't attack and that we don't offend. And we talked about that there are personalities that are more aggressive confrontational, they gravitate towards confrontation, and then there are those that are passive non-confrontational. And in marriage, you want to make sure that you are telling each other when something is wrong, typically on the day it takes place, but you don't want to do it in an attacking way, and you don't want to respond defensively because you make it more difficult to get to that place of resolving it. And then we talked a little bit about the beauty of connecting, how when in the midst of a conflict resolution, when you're trying to understand as well as be understood. And really, it takes a lot of maturity. I really think you need the Holy Spirit in you in the midst of a conflict to care as much about understanding how the other person feels as you care about them understanding how you feel. I think when you do that, then you put yourself in a place to be able to resolve a conflict quickly without unnecessary wear and tear on the relationship, without a sick feeling in your stomach because it takes you 4 or 5 or 6 days to get through the conflict. And then we talked about the feelings formula, which I think is an amazing way to let someone know how they've upset you, how they've hurt you, what your conflict is. So when you say, hey, when you did, and you state what they did, it made me feel like, and you state how you feel. And that takes some intentionality. You've got to think of, so you can't just overreact and just spurt out, what did you just do that for? You've got to think through, okay, that hurt. Why did it hurt? And it helps you to, when you use that feelings formula, you're not going to come across in an attacking way. Hey, when you did this, it made me feel, when you spoke to me that way, it made me feel disrespected. Okay, that's not an attack. You didn't say they disrespected you. You said it made you feel disrespected. And they can respond by saying, wow, it did, not defensive. No, I didn't. It's like, it did make you feel that way. Wow, that wasn't my intention. And then you can move on to being able to resolve the conflict. Now, when you have come to a place that you had the discussion, brought out what's upsetting you, you didn't attack, you didn't defend, you're trying to understand as well as be understood, and then you use the feelings formula to let a person know how what they did made you feel, then you're going to have an understanding. But how do you truly resolve? In other words, how do you resolve that conflict in a way that it never gets brought up again? Okay, that's tricky. Because a lot of times when we have a conflict and we bring up, hey, when you just did that, it really upset me, then the person says, well, what about when you did this? And we refer to things in the past. Or you're always doing that, or you're never doing that. As we do those things, we're going back in the past. And when you go in the past and bring up either previously resolved conflicts or previously unresolved conflicts, when you do that, you make it much more difficult to solve the conflict of the moment. After all, it's difficult enough to solve them one at a time. But when you start bringing other issues in, that you have to have a boundary that doesn't allow that to take place. So to truly resolve, you've got to deal with things one at a time. So if you're bringing up an issue that you're upset with, and the person says, well, what about when you, and they refer to something that you did to them, that is a way of being passive aggressive. It's a way of being defensive. But let's say they bring something up that was not ever brought up, then immediately time out. Wait a second. When did that happen? Last Tuesday. Why didn't you tell me last Tuesday? Why are you bringing it up now as a bookend to something I'm bringing up and then not related at all? So you want to have a boundary where you talk about one issue at a time, and that involves dealing with your issues as they happen on the day they take place. So in marriage, here's a biblical time frame for a conflict to be resolved: on the day it takes place. At least as if it's at all possible. In the scriptures, it says this: be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you're still angry. So you want to have that conversation on the day it happens. And if when you bring up that conflict, the person starts bringing up other things from the past, you got to stop, time out, because you're going to have, It's like blowing a big old balloon up, and you blow it up real big and you don't tie it and you let it go. What happens to that balloon? It starts to fly all over the room, just the way when you bring up a conflict and someone starts bringing up other things from the past, that conversation is going to start going all over the place. And listen, it's not going to be a productive conversation. So we want to bring up things as they happen. And I encourage couples to make an agreement to do that. When that is brought up, so now the issue is brought up, you're not dealing with issues from the past or other issues, and the person actually hears the feelings from you and they understand, wow, I realize how I hurt you. It wasn't my intention, but I'm sorry that what I did made you feel that way. Or in the event that the person did it on purpose, then they would say, you're right, and it's not, you didn't only feel that way, you felt that way because I did something that not only caused it, I was wanting to hurt you. Okay? Whatever it is, you own it. The person uses the feelings formula, doesn't know what the other person's feeling on the inside. The other person responds honestly, and at that point, the person that committed the offense would say, I'm sorry for what I did. But saying you're sorry and even the apology being accepted does not mean you've been forgiven. Okay? It could mean that, but you want evidence that you've been forgiven. So you would say, I'm sorry that what I did made you feel that way, or I'm sorry that I did what I did that hurt you. And then you ask this question, would you forgive me? Now that's a question, and it requires an answer. Now, a person needs to answer, would they forgive? Now, I will tell you this, that there is a biblical mandate in the scriptures that says that we need to forgive each other as Christ forgave us. There's quite a few places in the scriptures where it mandates that as forgiven believers, that we will be forgiving believers, forgiving of other people. After all, God forgives all our sins, and then we want to pick a couple of things and hold it against the person, be resentful and angry and withhold forgiveness when we've been forgiven everything. So we have a biblical mandate, and of course we want to experience and express that in marriage. So there are two responses to the question, would you forgive me? Although most of you are going to say there are three, but there are really only two. One is, yes, I forgive you. And the second is, no, I don't forgive you. Now the third is going to be, is I need more time. I want to think about it, which is a valid answer, but it's really a nice way of saying no. I won't forgive you yet. Not yet. And that's fine, but there is a biblical mandate that we forgive, and we don't want to go to bed angry at each other. Why? Because that anger, here's the worst thing, it goes away. You wake up and you don't remember. You forget, you say, that's no big deal. Just let it go. You don't let things go. That's why 2 weeks later when someone brings something up and you say, well, what about when you did this? You see, you don't really forget. But if you say, yes, I forgive you, the other person can make a mental note of that. And here's the deal. When something's been forgiven, it should never be brought up again with emotion. So if Tony does something to me and I'm very upset with her and we talk about it and I'm able to help her understand how what she did makes me feel. And Tony is my wife. And Tony says, I realize what I did was wrong and I'm very sorry. Would you forgive me? And then I have to answer that question. And I can say, well, I need more time. Well, why would I say that? Well, yeah, sometimes you want to make them suffer a little bit longer, feel the pain of what they did to you. But the bottom line is, when I get to the place that I say, yes, I forgive you, Tony and I have an agreement, that particular issue will never, ever be brought up again with emotion. In other words, I'm not allowed to get angry about that again. That doesn't mean I won't. But if I get angry about something I've already forgiven again, then that's between me and God, not me and her. So we're not going to have that conversation. When I say I've forgiven it, the issue is resolved. And that's how you truly resolve. Not by brushing things under the table. Not by having a conversation where you kind of meet in the middle. Where you are understood You're trying to understand. You're understood. The person understands how they've hurt you. They ask, they take ownership of it. They ask for forgiveness. And when you give them forgiveness in a healthy marriage, that particular issue will never be brought up again with emotion. And if the person gets angry about it again, the boundary is, we're not going to discuss it again. You already forgave, but I understand. And here's the deal. You can bring it up as a point of reference, but you can't be angry about it again. There's something called double jeopardy. It's in our court system. It means you can't be tried for the same crime twice. So when you have your conversation, it's like a trial. And when you realize, hey, I'm guilty, I've done wrong, and I'm at the mercy of you, we're all at the mercy of God, but I'm at the mercy of you, and would you forgive me? And when the answer is yes, you don't have to go to that court again and redo that trial. So when we do that, when we bring up our issues on the day they happen and we discuss them and we try and understand as well as be understood, and when we understand how the person's been hurt, whether it's intentional, whether it's true or not, if it's how they feel, when we own that and ask them to forgive us and we receive forgiveness, we have effectively resolved our conflicts. Now, real quick, and I'll end. Tony and I were not very good at this in the early years of our marriage, but we have mastered it. And when we have a conflict, typically it's the only one we have to deal with. We're not talking about, what about this and what about that? And there's no balloons flying around because all of our issues are dealt with. And when we have a conflict, if I do something that bothers her, that's more likely. But if she does something that bothers me, once in a while, that's the only thing we have to talk about. And it's pretty easy to have a productive conversation when that's the case. So I hope these 3 sessions on resolving conflict will help you. If you can master the skill of resolving conflict, I can promise you, you're going to have a marriage that feels like it's taking place in heaven. God bless you. And next week, we'll talk about skills development. We're going to talk about finances. So I'll see you next time.